Showtime!
Ladies and gentlemen, please make your way to your seats.
Showtime!
Please make your way to your seats. The show is about to begin.
Showtime!
Let the magic begin.
Welcome back to Futuretech, your weekly source for the latest in tech, innovation, and business. I'm the startup coach, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, John Irwin. How are you doing today, John?
Good. How are you guys? How are you, Craig? It looks like a nice day out today.
We had our Startup Investor Drinks on Wednesday. Our last one of the year was a great event, and I'm looking forward to our January 25th one.
Absolutely. Can't wait for that one. That'll be a good one. Launch the new year, start fresh.
Yeah, and we'll be back at Futurepreneur, and we got a bunch of new programs. And yeah, if you've been hesitating, it's time to start your new business. Come on out and join us.
Absolutely.
So let's jump right into this. Our first article here comes from nature.com, and it's all about Crispr 2.0. Crispr 2.0, a new wave of gene editors, heads for clinical trials.
This is cool, scary, interesting, all in one. So there's a new and improved gene editing technology that's moving into clinical trials now that the first CRISPR therapy has been approved by the FDA in the US. And it uses what's called base editing, which allows you to change single DNA letters or bases to correct mutations. So avoiding double strand breaks and different things. So it's being tested right now, apparently, for high cholesterol and leukemia. Base editing it's limited in what DNA sequences it can target, but it provides ultra precision at the single letter level. So this can allow correcting specific mutations in underlying diseases. Now, the other part is the prime editing, which can change bases and insert/delete short DNA sequences by offering more flexibility than base editing. Prime medicine has plans more for like an immune kind of disorder. And the versatility in that of prime editing gives it promising potential to replace whole defective genes with a single treatment design. But the problem is it's kind of complex, so it also makes it more challenging to optimize. These are new tools that offer more precision and versatility than the original CRISPR Cas9 system. So, for example, replacing entire genes to treat diseases caused by multiple mutations. Just to give people a little bit of history, so while CRISPR's Cas9 revolutionized genomic engineering, it introduced double strand breaks that risked unwanted mutations. There's probably articles that we could find on that, but these new tools like base and prime editing are going to help to mitigate this factor. What's cool about it is this is the first time that CRISPR has been approved for therapy, but it establishes genome editing to treat disease, boosting interest in next generation techniques like epigenomic editing, which is kind of cool. And epigenomic editing it alters gene activity through DNA modifications rather than sequences. It avoids kind of permanently altering the underlying DNA sequence, which could bring up some safety concerns for regulators, but the long-term stability needs a lot of validation for that.
So I understand on December 8th, the USDA approved the CRISPR Cas9 therapy for sickle cell disease.
Yes.
And the cost of that is somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.1 million US.
That's it?
It's great that we can treat this, and it looks like this is the second potential treatment that has been approved. You know, obviously the regular person and no medical insurance company in general is going to approve this. So
No.
How long till it becomes a real price? Say, I don't know, 10,000?
I guess with anything, right? Except for, and we could get into penicillin or what's that other one, the EpiPens another day, as far as the cost goes, because those have been around for years. But there's a bunch of different costs that come into play. So there's the laboratory equipment, there's specific personnel. You've got to go through research, different trial stages. It could take many, many, many years, but there are treatments out there right now that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if we're talking millions of dollars to cure a disease, can you put a price on that for now? But I know it's expensive and it's going to be
Yes,
limited.
you can, because most people can't afford it. You can't put a price on it because, like, I'm sorry, but what percentage of Canadians or Americans can afford that? You can say put a price on it. While doctor can, you're 2.1 million. You don't have that. Get that heck out of here. Sorry, buddy. I get it. Yeah, that people would pay anything. That's assume they had it to pay.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm not too familiar with sickle cell and who that affects, but it seems like we've had these other episodes, and based on kind of what I've looked at, now that it's approved, right? You could see more widespread commercial usage and research anywhere from the next 5 to 10 years. The thing with CRISPR is if we're able to automate it, right? If we're able to automate procedures through robots, that's going to drastically reduce the cost. I'm thinking we're probably 10, 15 years away from that. And I know there's people right now who are biohacking themselves and testing out these these gene editing kind of home brew kits, which is kind of scary. So who knows? There may be a home brew that is obviously not safe and not approved, but that gets into a whole other crazy, scary procedures.
Well, let's take a step back. They just got approval for this. In order for the price to come down, it needs to be, regularly available in your local city or, major metropolises. There needs to be clinics. So what are some of the potential challenges or limitations associated with these next generation editing techniques? We want to see them scale. So what are the issues with?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is precision and targeting and toxicity. So precision and targeting is if you're editing a gene, you have to ensure you're precisely, specifically editing that one gene that you want to edit, or that one DNA strand that you want to edit. You want to avoid unwanted kind of off-target edits. And that's challenging because targeting the right genomic locations accurately is critical because you don't want to touch anything else. So there's delivery methods. So you want to ensure that delivering large genome editing machinery into target cell tissue, it's very difficult. So viruses are typically commonly used, but they pose a lot of risks for your immune system and different things like that. Toxicity I talked about. So the editing process could introduce DNA damage, inaccurate repair, or byproducts. So long-term safety is being evaluated, just like any of these new vaccines that are out using the mRNA technique. What are the long-term issues with it? I know the government of Canada, we could get into conspiracies about mRNA and the COVID vaccine and different things like that. But at the end of the day, they really rapidly push that to market. And sorry, I digress on that, but there's so many different challenges. There's complexity, there's size limitations. When I talk size limitations, I'm talking about how the components have to be miniaturized to avoid immune responses, but also retain their function. So the components of the gene editing, right? So, and again, like we were just talking about, there's the high cost. So developing and manufacturing of personalized therapies using these approaches is expensive, and it's going to be expensive for at least the next 10 years. The other thing that we don't know is the resistance, right? So edited cells could, in theory, develop resistance to editing machineries over time. There's so many different challenges and limitations and different problems that still need to be overcome. But the biggest hurdle is that it's been approved, or there is a small approval in the US to kind of continue that research. So we will see advances going forward.
I think we can agree of the two of us. I'm the conspiracy theory guy here. And you want to talk about the fact that mRNA doesn't really work. We haven't got a successful, good treatment with it, but it's owned by the CIA, so they have to force it to work because it's part of their. Yeah, we can talk about those conspiracy theories all you want.
I've never heard that our mRNA is owned by the CIA.
Go take a look up who owns Moderna and where'd it come from.
Okay, I'll have a look after that. Yeah.
This leads me to a show that was out a few years ago, Orphan Black.
Okay,
if you remember that.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I never. Is it a Canadian show, right?
I believe it was made out in Vancouver although I don't really like this show, the She-Hulk star, Tatiana, I can't remember her last name.
Tatiana Maslany.
Yeah, she was amazing in Orphan Black. Poor writing and She-Hulk and whatnot. Sorry about your luck there, Tatiana, but you're an amazing actress and a lot of other things. So anyway, if you haven't watched it, it's really all about generation splicing and cloning. In fact, she plays multiple clones of herself that are different characters with different personalities in the show that they meet, and they discover that you meet yourself and you're like, what the heck? And all this stuff starts to unravel. But it goes to my next question is, what are the potential ethical concerns? Because in that show, people are enhancing their strength and whatever. Somebody's giving himself a tail, and they have these all clubs where you can only get in if you're modded.
Yeah.
We see these dystopian futures, and we all know that, hey, we want a kid who's strong and smart, and let's get rid of disease in the fetus or what have you. What are the ethical concerns around?
There are so many. And the biggest one, or that I think right now is like you said, is the inequality of access. So the therapies, even 10, 15 years down the road, the therapies may only be accessible to wealthy parents or wealthy patients, right? We need to ensure ethical allocation of the resources. It needs oversight. The germline editing, so editing genomes of eggs, sperm, or embryos could result in heritable genetic changes affecting future generations without consent, right? So this raises genetic enhancements in eugenics, and we can talk about this was, I think, in The Boys and Gen V, I think it's called, the shows. I think they're doing it after they're born, but still without consent. So if you guys are interested in that, go watch that show. It's a great show. Genetic enhancement. So that just falls right into that. So as techniques advance, there may be pressures to move beyond treatment to enhance aims like augmenting intelligence, looks. So this blurs the line between medicine and human augmentation. This might be the next plastic surgeon kind of thing in the future. Identity and diversity. So widespread use of gene editing could, in theory, undermine aspects of human identity, traits or diversity that some see as socially or culturally valuable. Again, and we talked about this with AI, but regulation and governance. Different countries could be researching different things, and just there's so many different. They could have different frameworks, different protocols. There's a lot of scary stuff there. And then social implications. So access to these techniques may further social stratification, so genetics, status and health, impacts on disability rights and different things like that. There's going to be a lot of oversight and public engagement are going to need it for these methods to progress ethically.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here around, like, who do you trust? You talk about regulation on this stuff. You talk about disease, viruses, and all the other weird stuff that can happen. Go back to, what was it, Neuromancer? I remember reading the story about the Keanu Reeves movie, if you remember that. Neuromancer. Yeah.
No.
And all the people twitching out because of their enhancements and stuff, and they're not quite, and the government's keeping the cure from everybody. I just see where, once you start going down this road of gene editing and then not giving proper access to people, now you got backwater gene editors and people just doing whatever they got to do because, I've got this disease or I've got this thing, or I'm rich enough that I want Conehead, whatever. I don't know. And
do you mean Johnny Mnemonic?
Oh yeah, Johnny Mnemonic. Sorry.
Yeah,
Neuromancer was the original.
Neuromancer was Dennis Villeneuve, I think.
No, William Gibson.
Oh, okay.
It's a William Gibson book, Neuromancer. He coined the phrase cyberpunk and the cyberspace. Johnny Mnemonic is a short story by William Gibson. I just mixed the two up. I apologize.
Oh, okay, sorry.
They take place in similar worlds, which is it's really interesting concept. But nonetheless, sorry to get off on the pop culture references here, but this stuff is very exciting and concerning. Like, obviously, I'm not a big fan of regulation, like I was just saying, but you can't just let people go do whatever the hell they want, because this stuff is really scary and it could cause all sorts of stuff. So definitely something to watch. Do you see some of the long-term consequences of doing this stuff?
That's the thing is I could speculate, but like we talked about, there could be inherited genetic changes. So effects on future generations it's going to be difficult to predict, as any edits introduced could hypothetically be passed down. So there could be long-term multi-generational studies that are required to do this. And how do you do that while trying to advance the technology and trying to get it implemented? So that could take decades. There could, again, like I just talked about some of the challenges, emergence of resistance. There's a possibility that edited cells or their descendants could develop resistance to the actual editing machinery over many cell divisions. There could be unanticipated gene interactions. So knocking out or modifying one gene could disrupt the networks and pathways in unexpected ways. And we won't know that until we uncover the complex interactions that are happening. Again, off-target mutations. So a lot of the ethical implications also come into the long-term consequences too. Environmental interactions. So edited genotypes could respond differently than expected to future environmental exposures like pathogens, chemicals, or lifestyle or behavioral factors, right? Like, there's so much that we don't know about this. And if we come back to the society impact, so widespread use may gradually alter human hereditary traits and diversity in ways that impact social structures, cultural values, and human nature kind of relationship. Just to reiterate the point, vigilance, oversight, and tons of studies are going to need to be done for this. It's crazy. It's scary. It's cool, but scary.
Definitely cool, definitely scary. I think the scary part's a little longer away than close, but I like the fact that we're getting to the point that we have different techniques to attack long-term diseases, and either get rid of them completely or use epigenome editing. And how is it different than the regular CRISPR editing? Because this, instead of altering the sequence of the gene itself, this changes how the genes are expressed by altering the epigenome, including any of the array of chemical inner modifications to the DNA that affect gene activity. So instead of actually slicing the gene, they throw something on top of it that interferes or changes the chemical reactions. This stuff hasn't moved quickly as other ones because epigenome edits are erased during cell division. So it becomes you edit this thing, and when that cell divided, like, what you've edited goes away. But they've had some interesting success here, where they've had the effects of this lasting longer than 11 months right now. Like, I guess they're still monitoring this thing, where they use chemical tags of methyl groups that are attached to DNA to regulate the activity of a gene that was causing some trouble. And it seems to be working pretty well. So, and this kind of technology doesn't have the same ethical concerns as your actual gene editing.
Yeah, because it doesn't change. It doesn't actually change the DNA sequence itself, right? So
Yeah.
So it methylates the DNA and modifies it. It modifies the histone proteins as opposed to editing the actual DNA strand itself, the sequence itself.
This was developed out of Stanford University by Stanley Q, I think. QI. How do you pronounce it? Key? Stanley Key?
Yeah.
And it looks like he's trying to do some interesting alternatives to CRISPR editing and some things that they cannot. So this technology is in the early stages, and as we get a handle on it, I'm very interested to see what happens next. But I'm also concerned, this is a shout out again. I'll put my conspiracy hat on, unless you need to, don't use those DNA 23andMe, find my, it's going to all this stuff. It's going to China. Your data is going to all these labs everywhere that are trying to use these to figure out how to edit the human genome and that kind of stuff. Take a look at the EULAs. They're selling your data to everyone else. If you're fine with that, go nuts.
The scary part is, who just had a breach? 23andMe had a data breach? I think
they've all had one.
Yeah. The other thing too is not just foreign entities getting access to your data, but what about insurance companies here in Canada? There's nothing stopping 23andMe or all these other companies from selling your DNA data to these insurance companies, and then these insurance companies could potentially use that and say, "Oh, well, you're predetermined
pre-existing conditioned. Yeah, pre-existing conditions, not our problem." So this call be used against you. So you got to be careful. It's nice to see the upside, but the downside in our world is just as big.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's scary. So it's interesting. So it's going to be interesting to see in the next 5-10 years what other gene editing type of technology is going to come out, if any. So we'll have to see. I know there was a big push for stem cells back in the day as far as to help treat diseases and grow stem cells specifically for specific use cases. I haven't heard much. I do know that there are some stem cell therapies that are happening, but again, that's not DNA editing, but that is another potential treatment for disease and for, like, you can regrow limbs and a whole bunch of different things. We could get into stem cells another day.
That's an interesting technology, but the only things I've seen some stuff, it's banned in the US.
Yeah.
So people go down to the US, but I've also seen some celebrities hawking these services. Like I saw something with Mel Gibson on it ages ago talking about, my dad got this treatment and now he's hard as a rock and he's 90. I'm like, what? So this is the new Viagra stem cell research? What? So I just feel like people are shilling this stuff. So you got to wonder when that's the stuff that you're seeing versus helping people solve long-term problems.
Yeah.
So this next article from New Scientist talks about a supercomputer that simulates the entire human brain will be switched on in 2024. And it'll be on TikTok 3 minutes later.
So the key thing is simulating, right? I think they're using. Well, let's dive into it. So they're building a supercomputer, and they're calling it, I think, Deep South, and it's going to be capable of simulating the synapses of the entire human brain through 228 trillion synaptic operations per second. So this matches estimates of it has estimates of the human's brain processing power. So the goal is to understand how the brain is able to process vast amounts of information while using relatively little energy. And I know we talked about that earlier, and which this could potentially inspire new computing technology. It's being constructed in the International Center for Neuromorphic Systems in partnership with Intel and, get this, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. I don't know if, for those of you who don't remember, HP, they were a force to be reckoned with back in the day. They still have some good laptops and stuff, but so it's going to use.
I've got a few HP stories.
Oh, do you? Okay, yeah. They HP. Who did they partner with, or who did they merge with back in the day? But anyways, I digress. So it's going to use neuromorphic processing, which mimics the brain's analog asynchronous signals between neurons, potentially, hopefully, in a more efficient way than traditional computing. The unprecedented brain scale simulation capability could provide insights into conditions like Alzheimer's, epilepsy, and also, and since AI is the big thing, could actually help develop real AI systems. They're hoping it's going to help us to understand the complex network functionality beyond what's possible with individual brain region stimulations. Because right now they're just doing kind of individual brain region simulations and they don't have the capability to do a whole brain simulation. So this is really cool as far as helping us to understand, because the brain is a muscle that we have very little information on how it works and different things like that. It's cool. And the one thing to note, and the reason why I think one of their partners is Intel, is they're going to be using Intel's Loihi chip, I think I pronounced that right, to provide the modeling for large-scale neural connectivity graphs. Yeah, it's really, really interesting where they're going to go, and hopefully this is going to work. Hopefully when they switch it on, it's going to work. But until they flip that switch, we won't know.
Yeah, you mentioned, who did IBM buy? Didn't they buy everybody?
Yeah, and where are they now? IBM. I think they're still big in the corporate world, but
Yeah, but if you've had any investment in IBM over the last, I don't know, 10 years, the stock has been probably flat as heck. It's not going anywhere.
yeah, they had what was their supercomputer that competed on Jeopardy?
Watson.
Watson. Yeah, that was big back in the day, and they kind of fell off after that, I think. But they're doing in the background. I think they're the ones behind the IPFS, interplanetary file storage, which is used in blockchain. But I could be wrong on that.
They are doing a bunch of interesting stuff. If I recall correctly, they bought Red Hat, which is really the hottest product, the best thing they did. And at the time, everyone's like, what the heck? Why are you doing this? But apparently it's their biggest moneymaker now, or one of them. And anyway, let's not get off topic here. Yeah. Let's get back to this supercomputer that'll simulate the human brain rather than worry about what IBM's doing. Simulating the human brain. There's 1,000 things reasons you could be doing it. Like, I want to figure out how an organic computer works. I want to figure out how processing works on a different level. I want to figure out how, like I noticed in the article, it says the brain does a lot of huge amounts of processing while consuming limited power. So we want to create, I don't know, cellular-based computers that reduce power usage? Like, why are we doing this? Because I can, map in the human brain from we've done a bunch of different things. We have AI that's supposed to simulate all this stuff. A computer that simulates the entire human brain, like, I don't understand that. Like, so my emotional centers fire and it decides it's not working today because it's having a bad day, or like, there's a lot of wrong with the human brain.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. It's kind of cool. Obviously, this is using silicon technology, or whatever Intel's Loihi chip is based on. So it's not using any kind of organic materials or anything, which I know there is some research being done, but it could help us to develop energy efficient processing, which could inspire new hardware architectures. Back to AI, there's no real true AI yet, right? They're a bunch of set of instructions, and they're learning off of these large language models, right? So being able to replicate the brain could be used to train and test more human-like and actual real AI, or AGI. The biggest thing too is, with all of this, I think, what's the percentage of our brain that we use? Is it 10%?
Yeah, I think that's a fallacy.
I think that's a fallacy too. But with all of these different synaptic connections and things like that, you could run a bunch of different what-if scenarios that can help us to understand disease progression, maybe identify new pharmaceutical targets. You could model, and like you said, Craig, you could potentially model consciousness and the mind, so understand how brain functionality grows. So it may help with mapping cognition and subjective experience, which is kind of cool and scary. So there's a whole bunch of different things: climate modeling, material science, cybersecurity. The list goes on and on as far as the applications of this go.
Apparently that 10% myth comes from a random quote of Albert Einstein. It's just a myth that's been passed down forever.
Okay.
And they just don't know. They don't know how much we use it. But I just quickly looked at that. Again, when you're mapping the human synapses, that is interesting, because we're talking about storage, we're talking about communication, we're talking about the mechanism. I think more than, I don't see this saying we're now going to act like a human and think more like a human. I see this as more of we're going to evaluate this as more of a storage and interactive mechanism, and how can we simulate the human brain to make computers more efficient.
Not only more efficient, but also I think this is the path to the true artificial intelligence side of things, I think, for sure.
Is it?
Well, how can you have artificial intelligence when you're talking about artificial intelligence without, if you're mapping it after the human brain, how can you do it without having an artificial human brain?
Sit back and say, one, any artificial intelligence we build, one, is not really intelligence. That's a whole other discussion. But let's just say we turn one on, we got this artificial intelligence. It's not going to be human. So why would we even begin to consider, like, it's got to think like us or map a human brain? And none of this is going to happen until we get quantum computers, because it's just not going to work. Like, it's all skip logic now, and it all falls apart with, like, the computers seem to have a mental breakdown at some character limitation or whatnot, and they just fall apart. This will act as a human brain, and I'm the biggest skeptic of that, because, like, what is the point? Like, are you mapping the cross platform communications from the amygdala to the other areas of the zone, and the right brain, left brain? Like, what is the point?
Well, the point is to understand how the human brain works, potentially, because we're still learning a lot about it. So there's a bunch of different things. So understanding it, will also.
I get the new technology and stuff. They're trying to force this into a mold of simulating an actual human brain for thought processes and all that kind of other stuff. I think it's something we shouldn't even bother with, because extract as much information about the efficiencies in the process, but not necessarily make something that acts like us. Like, why are we trying to make something that acts like us when we know we're so flawed? We make mistakes. We're biased in all these different ways. From a statistical bias, we think risks are smaller than they are and bigger than they are and all these things. Yeah. Why would we try and map a computer to our emotionally unstable, unlogical brain?
Well, there's a bunch of things. So it could help provide insights into cognition, memory, and intelligence. The biggest thing is neurological disorders. So actual brain simulations may help us to understand the causes of various disorders. It can help us to support drug testing or therapies without having animal or human trials, and also predict impacts of injuries or degeneration. So you were talking about low powered stuff. So yeah, let's talk about brain inspired computing. So it could move towards more efficient, sustainable systems. Yeah, we could get into this, and we could get into uploading. So uploading our consciousness, and so we could potentially live forever, and we could get into that one. I'm sure you want to dive into that one, but
now that might be the only thing I could see why we'd want to do something like that. Now, mapping the interactions and the stuff that travels before, so we can understand what's happening in the brain, is great. But programming a computer to fully act like an emotionally unstable human being and building it around that seems to be, unless you're going to do something like an upload or create, NPC, artificial intelligence, that's in a post-apocalyptic war is going to be our friend. I don't know. It's just
one that I just thought of just as we're talking here. So you can upload. What about downloading? So could someone eventually beam consciousness or beam something into your brain wirelessly without permission, kind of thing?
So now we're talking about wireless without permission. That's interesting, but we're talking about more of an altered carbon situation. Once we understand how the brain stores your personality and consciousness, and we can map it to a computer somewhere else, then we should be able to download it, or with so now you're talking about a weird soulless version of immortality.
Applications, there's so many different things that come into play. It's cool though. At this point, I would say it's cool. It's interesting. I'm curious to see where it goes. I'm going to watch too. I can't remember the exact date. I don't know if they put the exact date as to when they're going to switch it, but they said 2024, so we'll have to watch out for that and maybe do a follow-up.
I'm going to jump to the next one now, but I honestly believe we're not making any of these leaps without a quantum computer to power all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's great research we're doing, because I can think it'll lead somewhere. But again, I think it's a mistake to create a computer to act like a human, because that's actually when we get weird shit happening, like people trying to take over the world and stuff, because we've got these emotional centers and this and that. And so what if you program a computer that doesn't send across traffic right, all of a sudden it becomes evil because the two parts that have of the brain don't communicate? Like, who wants that? Anyway, I've got a sci-fi future in my brain, apparently. So this next one is from BetaKit, and it talks about the 6 Canadian tech founders sharing their wins and learnings from 2023.
I thought this article was interesting because it profiles 6 Canadian tech founders and their reflections. So Saad Aziz of Vault, Ali Javid of Repbook, Avery Penneran of Tailscale, Fatima Zaidi of Quill, Benji Christie of Formic AI, and Michael Miller of Birdo Health. And they were asked a bunch of different questions, but one was they were asked about the top technology of 2023. And surprise, surprise, most founders pointed to AI advances like ChatGPT. But I think that it was Zaidi that noted that we barely scratched the surface of AI uses. So, but the thing is, and again, this kind of echoes what everyone is saying out there, is when adopting new technologies, you have to focus on the importance of bringing true value rather than just jumping on the bandwagon. So I think this year was a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon. And I think in the coming years, we're going to look, like companies are going to look at how can they bring the true value of these technologies, or especially AI, into their culture, into their work environment. So what these founders said was they're evaluating new technologies based on customer needs and simplicity, and focusing on the ideal customer experience. So that's really cool, because not only are they implementing it to make their lives easier maybe or more efficient, but they're looking at the ideal customer experience as well. I think it was Avery Penneran, he said that supply chain security, he sees that as a major trend after high-profile software vulnerabilities, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know what those implications mean, but I think one of the biggest things that we saw this year was a lot of cybersecurity attacks, a lot of hacks that went through that people's personal data. But the one thing in this article that stood out to me, and it's something that I strive to do too, is I don't know about you, Craig. I'm going to ask you though. Most founders in this article kept their inboxes near zero through prioritization and delegation. So my question to you is, what is your inbox at, Craig?
17,011 unread emails right now.
Jesus. That's crazy. Mine's at 0. And that's why it kind of touched with me, because I love keeping it at 0. It helps to, and everyone's to each their own, right? Before I used to be like you and used to have like thousands of unread emails, and it's just crazy. So the one tool I like a lot is with Microsoft Outlook. You can schedule a follow-up reminder for a specific email, which is what really helps me keep my inbox at 0. But to continue on with the article, they said that their teams are kept motivated through balance, through understanding individual needs, through empowerment, addressing fear of failure, and focusing on long-term visions. The one thing that that came out too is their top challenges included, and this is something that we're seeing, I think, less and less because companies are mandating back to the office, but managing remote work cultures, economic uncertainty in Canada, and supporting struggling industries where there are top challenges. So some takeaways are understanding core problems, surrounding yourself with smart people, and not outsourcing culture and strategy, which was interesting. Really, really interesting article to kind of look back into 2023.
When I worked in a corporation, I used to be a little bit more aggressive with managing it. But the one thing, I'm not making excuses because it is what it is. Understand that I send out all our Toronto Starts emails from my email address.
Yeah.
So I am on everybody's email list.
Yeah.
I just looked through my first page of all unread emails, and I think there's one in there that maybe I should be reading. The rest is all junk.
Yeah.
So I haven't gone through to aggressively manage that. But let's go back. I think from a good point of view, there's tools now. There's tools in Google.
Yeah.
You can snooze emails, so it'll warn you 15 minutes later, 2 hours later, tomorrow, next day, whatever, just like in Outlook. There's also AI tools and stuff to help you sort through all of this stuff. I think if you can manage that, you got to stay away from the shiny objects and the urgent but unnecessary or unimportant tasks. The phone ringing is not necessarily important, but it's urgent because it's ringing and it's right there. But it depends who's calling, right? And the same thing with the email coming in. Every time there's a blip, every time there's a social media blip, you got to focus time. I talk to a lot of founders. Yeah. And a lot of them, to stay focused, they do I can't remember what the technique is called, but it's 20 minutes of focused work, and then you can take a break. So you chunk up your 20 minutes at a time. You just start working on it.
Is it the Pomodoro technique?
Yeah, that's it. The Pomodoro technique. A lot of people use that, and stay focused on the big picture. I coach a lot of startups, and I find that it's very easy for them to get mired in the little stuff and start spending most of their time working on things that don't move the needle. And talk to a coach, get a support group of founders so that they can bring you out of that malaise of, hey, wait a minute, why are you doing this? I was working with a founder recently last week, and we were talking about different things, and we completely changed our business model. I'm like, why are you spending all your time trying to make this $200 sale when it's clear that you should be spending the time making these $100,000 sales? Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. Like, you've got to take a step back. So I love reading this article and the advice being resilience and the balance of personal life, because you work all the time. Being a founder is a slog. I talk to a lot of people and they say, don't you ever stop working? And the answer is yes. I'm not working right now because I'm talking to you. I used to get laughed at. I go to a local bar and I pull up my laptop and I start working. And, and when the person I was going to meet or whatever's coming, I put the computer away and go. But, I got stuff to do. I run a company. No one's going to do it but me. And that takes its toll on you. So you really have to prioritize, outsource the small stuff, take off the table anything that's not going to move the needle, and focus solely on those 2 or 3 things that are really going to move the needle for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing is they in the article itself, it just mirrors what you said. They're celebrating doubling down on their strategic priorities and securing major customers or contracts. So exactly what you're saying, right?
That's the way to do it. And if you're having trouble, like I said, find a founder support group. Give me a call. We can have a 15-minute call or whatever. But talk to somebody that's not in as deep in your product or startup as you are, so they can give you a 10,000-foot look. Supply chain security, huge right now, because look what happened during COVID. Try and buy a boat right now. You can buy a boat, but you're not getting a motor, not getting an engine for 2 or 3 years. So good luck. Go try buy a new car now. As it's hard because of the chips, because of this, because of that. So supply chain security is becoming a huge thing. I like the advice of don't outsource your culture. That's something I've always firmly believed in. I reported to a board of directors at Deloitte & Touche when I was there. And I'm trying to remember which companies are a while ago. And talking to I reported to a new member of the board of directors like every year. They just switched it around and stuff. So it wasn't one. And remember once we were talking about budget, and I was saying, all right, like we're cutting budget here and there. And I was like, well, here's our entertainment budget and stuff. And he immediately said, don't worry about that. Keep that. And it was a lesson learned that it was so valuable. Like I had a team of 75 people. It wasn't a small thing. Sorry, that was at Mercer, the 75 people. Deloitte, my team was much smaller. Okay. The important of being the driving force in your culture. Never outsource that. And as the leader and as the leadership team, no matter you think you got an HR person taking care of it, it's not true. It's you. Yeah. And you have to be that person. If you ever come to my events, I'm wearing jeans and a hoodie usually. I got my hat on or off. It's very casual. And this is a lesson I learned early on because we used to have events or upscale places. I wore a jacket and a nice tie, and everyone come in, they were very stiff, didn't really interact with each other. And then we went to a dive bar one time, and everyone was so lively and communicated, and that set the mood for everybody. I set the mood. There's people that come to our events, they're dressed to the nines, but it's me, it's casual. I make mistakes on the mic every night. I don't do it on purpose, but I don't practice on purpose because we're getting people to come up and do open pitch. And when they see me flub something and they everyone relax, and I make joke of myself, and now everybody's in a good mood and like that's all on purpose because we're setting the culture and the mood that we're all here to support each other. That, you see me when someone walks off, I'm giving them a pitch advice and, maybe even doing a 2 or 3 line pitch for them, why people should go talk to them, that kind of stuff. And we're all educating each other, and it's all very supportive. And that permeates the culture. Everyone's trying to help each other. Yeah. That is, if you're not doing that, who is?
Yeah. And just to reiterate what you're saying, you need those circles of support in order if you're going to succeed. Some succeed without them, but it's better to why learn a lesson the hard way when you can learn it from someone who's already gone through it, right?
So when I was with Deloitte, there's just one ritual I would do with my new employees. Mm-hmm. And it usually had to do, we'd be going all around the country doing implementations. And because we were doing tech implementations at Deloitte, I was senior manager of architecture and planning, doing deployments of token ring to Ethernet, moving from network technology to Microsoft technology, moving from CC mail to Exchange, all this stuff. So but we'd fly somewhere and we'd go into an office and we do an implementation all weekend. Yeah. So Friday night, after working till whenever, I take everybody out drinking. And the newbie would always, I'm buying the drinks, and he'd get so hungover. And the next day, everyone else is, giving her, like, it's time to give her, play hard, work hard. If you can't, play hard. Yeah. And they learned that lesson pretty early on. It's okay to go and get a drink, but the next day, if I find you sleeping in the closet, you're in trouble. Yeah. You've got to work. And I know that's kind of cruel, but like people were like, holy crap, I couldn't believe what it is what it is. We are here to get a job done. It's okay to have fun. It's okay to mess around with each other. It's okay to do these things, but we've got a job to do. And that's number one.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I'm going to put you on the spot now because I read this article yesterday and I was wrong in the ranking. Rank these 3 things in the order that gave the most production from the team. Offering money, offering pizza, or offering praise from the boss.
Money is a demotivator, not a motivator. It doesn't make people work harder. It only makes them being unsatisfied. What was the second one?
Pizza.
Everyone likes food. I'm going to say pizza, honestly. The immediate response is praise from the boss. But you know what? It isn't. It's food. I bet it's food.
It is. Pizza. Yeah. Pizza, then praise, then cash.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cash is a demotivator, not a motivator. And if you want to talk to people that are happy to, but it's not in the factor. Like you want to have enough money to live and work and be whatever. But other than that, it's not.
Crazy, right?
Yeah,
I could see. Yeah, you getting it right because you've got that. You've got that.
I'm an old man and I've been doing this for 1,000 years. I feel like Methuselah. I've run different groups, do different teams, try different things. Yeah, you talk to people. It's funny. My business partner, he's got a full-time gig and he was just excited about his bosses taking him out to the cake. I'm like, hey, they're all. Yeah. It's funny what motivates people, but yeah, absolutely. Don't outsource that. They talk about office pets. Yeah. It's easier to have culture when you're in the same building. It's harder with remote teams. So definitely take the time, give people personal attention, personal rewards. If they're out in Vancouver and you're Toronto, make sure they get a gift bag or a towel or whatever you send them custom with here's spa tickets and whatever. So go have a day to yourself, whatever that gets them involved. And the other thing is make sure you have the tools so they can generally communicate with their team like this, whether it's Zoom or something else, where you just have these things open, where you start feeling part of a team on a regular basis.
I just wanted to correct myself. I know I said IPFS was IBM's technology, and I was wrong. It's Hyperledger. Sorry. Hyperledger is IBM's blockchain technology.
I know about Hyperledger. I just didn't. I know about IPFS, but I didn't know whose it was. So
it's not IBM. It's I get those. I got it mixed up. So anyways, yeah.
So I might be able to. I'll either leave this apology in, or I'll cut that part out at the beginning.
That's okay. That's fine.
You got anything to promote this week, John?
Nothing. I'm promoting. The only thing I promote is make sure that you take time off during the Christmas break. I know a lot of the big firms, they shut down between Christmas and New Year's, or at least they back down, but make sure to take some time for yourself. That's what I'm promoting this week.
This is a great time. You got to finish up what you got to finish up at work, but it's time to unplug, do meditative walks, start thinking about strategic stuff rather than tactical stuff, so that you can start the new year working on the business rather than in the business, so you can actually take the things forward. But now's the time to start spending time with your family. And if you put that stuff in the back of your brain, it'll bubble up at some point when you're ready. But it's a time to unwind and relax. Yeah. Remember why you're working as hard as you're working. You've got family, you got friends, you have stuff going on. Yeah. And
if this comes out in the new year, just same thing. If take some time, take time to yourself, take the time. If you need to take a weekend to disconnect, completely disconnect. Just focus on your health, and that work-life balance is critical. Even if you're a founder, whatever you are, make sure to find some balance in your life.
This will probably be the last episode of 2023. I think it'll come out just before the new year.
Okay, perfect.
If you're out there, you're in Toronto, come out to a Startup Investor Drinks. We're having it at Futurepreneur on January 25th. We have a special co-founder matchmaking event happening on February 14th at Futurepreneur, but that hasn't been posted yet. And we've got a few other very interesting stuff happening. We've got ID validation course, our funding course. I'm also taking new coaching clients. So those links will be in the show notes. Take a look at those. Awesome. And if you're looking for funding, make sure to click on John's link in the show notes and talk to him about government funding. I've got somebody I want you to talk to, a hardware startup. So
awesome. Happy to talk. I love hardware. So let's do it.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This has been Futuretech. I'll hope to see you here next week.
Thanks, guys.
Wow, that was amazing.
See you later, alligator.